Africans are keen on wanting their voices heard by the next U.S. president on U.S. Africa relations, regional and global issues. With the possibility of Melania Trump returning as U.S. First Lady, we're taking a look at her past life as a Slovenian model. And in our entertainment report, Heather Maxwell speaks to the famed Malian duo Amadou and Mariam. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The U.S. presidential election is just days away on Tuesday, November 5th, and the race between the candidates, Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris and Republican former President Donald Trump, is razor thin. Early voting here in Washington, D.C. is underway. And standing by live here in the nation's capital is VOA's Paul Diho. Hello, Paul. Tell us more about the voting and when it ends.
Thanks, Esther. Voting here in the District of Columbia is still ongoing. They close early voting on Sunday by 8 p.m. But to be honest with you, there's been a lot of people who have been voting, largely because D.C. is considered a blue district. If you will, a lot of people here tend to vote Democratic. But why are the numbers so high? For the first time talking to people are saying that the turnout, especially around this time, has exceeded the expectations of what a lot of people expected. Largely because D.C., so many things are happening in D.C. It's a microcosm of the whole world. A lot of people from all over the country come to Washington, D.C. So that's why voting in this district is going to be a significant thing going into these elections.
And what are the D.C. voters telling you is of utmost concern to them in this election?
Just like any person living in the United States, they're dealing with the same issues, from the economy to healthcare to immigration, abortion rights. Those are things that a lot of people have to contend with. In D.C. especially, we have the high unemployment rate. We have high homelessness in the District of Columbia. So those are some of the concerns that people have. Will this election change the way people look at how things are done in D.C.? Will a new government in place, or whether it's a federal government or the local council elections, make any difference for these voters? So people are concerned about some of the very issues that every single person in this country is talking about.
Paul, they have a complex language when it comes to D.C. elections. There's Initiative 83 on the ballot for D.C. residents. What does this mean, and what does it aim to change in terms of D.C. voters for those who are registered and even for those who are independent?
Terrific question. Esther, D.C. is in a unique spot. In most cases, other states, people vote in primaries. If you're a registered independent, Republican or Democrat, you get to vote in your primaries. But specifically in the District of Columbia here, people who are registered as independents don't vote in the primaries. So Initiative 83 wants to change that. It's going to allow, if it's voted for, if people vote yes on it, it's going to allow people to exercise that right. For example, there are close to 70,000 independent voters here, but when it comes to voting on even local issues, they don't have a voice. So they think by passing this Initiative 83, that could fundamentally change how people look at D.C. and how independents get to vote or have their voices heard.
Paul, thank you so much for your reporting. VOA's Paul Diho reporting live from here in Washington. In the finale of a 5-part series titled Messages to the Next U.S. President, let's hear from people across the continent about their expectations for U.S. Africa relations, regional issues, and global challenges.
Afrique s'est réveillée.
Africa has woken up. We can no longer accept anyone dictating to us, even if they are American. We have our pride and our dignity, and we want to fight for ourselves. If someone gives us orders and interferes in our affairs, it's clear that we won't be able to operate together.
On ne peut pas être d'accord. Ça, c'est évident.
The United States has many military bases with powerful military forces in various African countries. However, bringing military forces to Africa does not benefit Africans. Instead of investing in war and providing heavy weapons that lead to shooting, killing, and creating more refugees, attention should be given to improving the lives of the African people. Africa is still poor, facing infrastructure problems and technology issues like those in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's no doubt that they will benefit from the United States being involved there.
There's a lot of agreements set aside and put together. So as a Kenyan, we need for implementation of that agreement. That agreement was including like security, climate change, democracy, development, and aid funds. So we need the full implementation of that agreement and full support of US. You know, in Kenya we have a lot of security issues and we have counter-terrorism cases in Kenya. So we need a lot of cooperation and that agreement which was signed to be fulfilled.
We have enough proof that we shouldn't expect anything from American elections and American presidents. They are all in the same boat. The United States is a multi-ethnic, multi-racial nation. The whole world built the United States, particularly black people. But there has never been a policy, or at least a particular commitment, on the part of the United States toward Africa.
We expect America to remain a beacon of hope in terms of democracy and upholding also rule of law and human rights issues, especially in relations also to Africa, in their relations with Africa, and also taking a look also into the issues of extractive minerals which are also being extracted in Africa. We have seen also China taking advantage of the excessive minerals in Africa, but through financial illicit means.
Africans talking about the expectations for U.S.-Africa relations from the next U.S. president. Now, as we get closer to casting the ballots for the next U.S. president, I'm joined by a Nigerian election observer, Samson Italo. He's the executive director of the YAGA Africa. He is an experienced community organizer and development practitioner with over a decade's experience in constitution building, electoral governance, civic engagement, and political organizing. Mr. Italo, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you know, for a lot of people coming from Africa, like I did, the U.S. election process is very complex. And so we understand you're here as an election observer from Nigeria.
Right. Yeah.
So far, what are your observations?
I think there are quite interesting dynamics playing out in the election. This is one election that has grave implications for U.S. leadership position across the world. We see a trend of single-issue voting, where people are voting for just one single issue, and you just wonder if they're making emotional or rational choices. You also see different states, different rules. There's lack of uniformity. That's the U.S. design, but it's got its own complications. But I think this is one election where the trust level, in the entire process is quite high. There people have concerns about whether there'll be acceptability of the outcomes. And I say that the U.S. can learn from Africa. Just yesterday in Botswana, you saw what happened where the incumbent lost, and they accepted the outcome. We hope that the U.S. can learn, from Africa, especially given the Botswana example.
After a record 60 years in power for that ruling
That's
party
right.
in Botswana, now do you have a different observer approach when it comes to what we call here the Electoral College?
Well, because of the system that you have here, where you've got an electoral college, where you can win the popular votes and still not be declared the winner, our approach for this election is really focused on the process. So you look at the results transmission process and the results collation process, which is also what we do in Africa. We'd like to see, how that process is managed in a way that it inspires public confidence. We're also looking at issues around turnout, because elections are about people, and people need to show up. And with the context, quite, charged. We hope to see a higher turnout, especially women would really interested, and we'll be looking at whether women will use the power of their anger, to influence the outcome of this election. So looking at issues around turnout, also looking at the threat for violence, because I went to Atlanta, went to Maryland, and also in DC, and just speaking to people, one of the concerns that they have is the threat for violence. As you can see with ballot papers destroyed in Washington State and Oregon, these are also things you see in Africa, and we hope that they are not issues relating to violence, because most of those who are managing these elections seem to be under scrutiny and under political pressure, and we hope that they can resist it because the whole world is watching.
Well, you talk about Africa and comparison to the U.S., but we still have a couple of countries where it's been very chaotic when it comes to elections. And we've seen that, whether it's Southern Africa, East Africa, or even West Africa. Of course, we've had coups as well. But how does the U.S. election process really differ from what we see generally in the African continent during elections? I
think first is a culture of trust. In the U.S., you have the trust levels are very high. Despite, concerns expressed with respect to the transparency of the process, people still trust the process. That's why you have early voting. I observed early voting across the states that I've been to, and people just trust that even though they vote early, their votes will still be counted. The second sort of comparison that you see is about the institutions. The institutions function in a way that they're able to respond to shocks and setbacks compared to what you probably have in Africa. Though there are some countries in Africa that have strong institutions, but I think we could do better with respect to how we manage our elections. And then the level of transparency, I think is very high, and Africa can learn how to be transparent in managing its elections.
Now that draws me to a different question. So what do you think we can get out of Africa? What has been really good in terms of elections in Africa that we can borrow here in the US, and what can Africa borrow from the United States when it comes to elections there?
For Americans who are concerned that if the elections, depending on how it goes, the participants may not accept the outcome, look to Botswana, look to Nigeria, where political leaders have lost elections and they've accepted. That's one thing you can learn. Also learn, turnout for elections, how young people are speaking using their ballots. You see the level of turnout in different elections on the continent. Yeah. I think the last thing that we can also learn is democratic resilience. And we see from every election on the continent how Africans are resilient people, and their hopes in democracy is still very high, even though they have issues with the way we practice democracy. And I think America can learn democratic resilience from the continent of Africa.
Samson, you said it very well. Thank you so much for your great insight.
Always a delight. Thank you.
Right. Samson Italo is the Executive Director of U.S Africa. Successful Slovenian model turned U.S. First Lady Melania Trump has had a bittersweet experience in the limelight since her husband, Donald Trump, was elected president in 2016. Here's a look at her life and some voter expectations for her potential second term as First Lady. Viewers Veronica Balderas Iglesias has the story.
Her parents named her Melania Knaps. The world now knows her as former U.S. First Lady Melania Trump. She was born on April 26, 1970 in Novo Mesto, Slovenia, formerly Yugoslavia. During her upbringing in the town of Sevnica, her father sold cars and her mother worked in the textile industry. Knapps, however, was interested in fashion, recalls her former school friend Mirjana Jelancic.
She also liked designing. She would make new clothes out of old ones.
Knapps paused her college studies in design and under the name Melania Knapps pursued a modeling career in Europe. In the 1990s, her success brought her to the United States.
As a fashion model and someone who was often invited to upscale parties in New York, my understanding is that is how she met Donald Trump.
Knapps became Melania Trump on January 22, 2005, and gave birth to her first and only son, Baron, a year later. That same year, she also became a U.S. citizen. Melania Trump's life took a different turn when her husband ran for U.S. president in 2016 with the Republican Party, and she joined him on the campaign trail.
It is wonderful to be here today with you and with my husband. I'm very proud of him.
Donald Trump was sworn in as the 45th U.S. president in January of 2017. As First Lady, Melania Trump toured the world and took on projects like the Be Best campaign, focusing on children's well-being, online safety, and opioid abuse. She kept a lower profile than many First Ladies, but still faced intense media scrutiny, Jellison notes.
Criticized in some quarters for her fashion choices, for her decision not to move into the White House right away, for her Be Best campaign not being one of the most successful public service projects by a First Lady.
After leaving the White House, Melania Trump practically disappeared from the public eye. She has occasionally re-emerged to support her husband's 2024 bid for re-election and to promote her memoir.
Writing this memoir has been a deeply personal and reflective journey for me.
Wisconsin voter Austin Smith voted for Donald Trump in 2016. He shared his hopes for Melania Trump's possible return to the White House.
I would like her to maybe take up a couple of pet projects. One thing that I'm really passionate about is school lunches.
Democratic voter Jesslyn Kaur would like Melania Trump to be a, quote, impactful First Lady.
Going out and talking to, urban communities, going out across the country and making yourself known, not just as a figure that's standing behind the president, but as a woman with some sort of power.
Annalise Jellison, however, thinks as a second-term First Lady, Melania Trump would probably continue to, for the most part, shy away from the limelight. Verónica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News.
Still to come, music from famed Malian couple Amadou and Mariam. We'll be right back.
Beauty pageants have evolved over time. From being competitions solely focused on physical appearance, today they emphasize a combination of intelligence, talent, community service, and advocacy. Despite these changes, beauty pageants still face criticism. Some argue they continue to promote outdated beauty standards or reinforce stereotypes. This week on Our Voices, we'll explore how contestants use pageants as platforms to highlight social issues and discuss the challenges the beauty pageant contestant of color face. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, voters in Botswana have delivered a stunning defeat to the party that has ruled them for nearly 6 decades, registering their anger over a poor economy linked to a steady decline in the diamond trade by handing victory to opposition presidential candidate Duma Boko and the Umbrella for Democratic Change Party. President Mokgweetsi Masisi conceded defeat, ending the ruling party's 58 years in power. Masisi's Botswana Democratic Party dominated politics in the country for nearly 6 decades since its independence in 1966. The nation of just 2.5 million people will now be governed by another party for the first time in its democratic history. Kenya's new deputy president, Kithure Kindiki, was sworn in Friday after a court lifted orders barring his inauguration following weeks of legal challenges by his predecessor, Rigathi Gachagua, who was impeached by Parliament last month. Here's more on today's swearing in.
2 weeks after his predecessor was strongly ousted due to allegations of corruption and ethnic division, the new deputy president has been sworn in a colorful event attended by officials from the government and Western dignitaries. We sought to find out what Kenyans had to say about the new office bearer.
Brilliant man, he's a very young man, so we expect a lot from him, and he's not tribalious, so he's going to work for the whole Kenyans.
As we have seen the inauguration of today, and the talk and the speech of the leader that have been inaugurated today as the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya actually is going to bring a transformation if at all the leaders above him and under him will adhere to his word.
Not a happy Kenyan. I'm very disappointed because we elected the duo that is our Gachagua and Ruto, but today the president has really decided to disappoint us as Kenyans. And I believe there is going to be nothing much. We are going just to remain like Kenyans, and our economy is just going to be where it was.
Going forward, we believe that he himself and the Deputy President and the President and Dr. Ruto, they want to work together. They want to do everything possible to turn everything possible in this Kenya, economically, politically. They want to do everything that pertains to the security of this country.
I urge Kindiki to be a new face of Kenya, of a new Deputy President, who will give Kenya a new inclusivity of the whole Kenya, not just some regions whereby some people are felt as if they are excluded, not fully Kenyans, but a whole deputy presidents who represent the whole Kenya.
Inclusion hopes for Kenyans to the new sworn-in deputy president, Professor Kithure Kindiki. The challenge to him now remains how he is going to ensure inclusivity of all Kenyans, considering that he is a political appointee and not elected. For VOA Africa from Nairobi, I'm Zainab Said.
Kindiki has been part of President William Ruto's cabinet for 2 years and came under fire for supporting alleged police brutality during anti-government protests earlier this year. It's time for Entertainment Report, and Heather Maxwell has something special for us from one of the most famous African music couples in the world.
Hi, Esther. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to bring you this interview with Amadou and Mariam. This blind couple from Bamako, Mali, have been married and making hit records together for 50 years. They gave a concert at Wolf Trap in Vienna, Virginia recently to promote their new Best Of album. And before the show, backstage, I discovered just how they've been successful in marriage and music for so long, how life has improved for the visually impaired in Mali, and more. Let's watch.
Do you feel alright?
Greetings to everyone, first of all. It's true what you say. We've been married for more than 50 years. You can't be married for 50 years without problems. We listen to each other. That's our secret.
The
fundamental is having the respect for each other and to understand that what's important to one is important to the other. And to say that we are husband and wife, that we have a mission, we love each other because we make music together, we travel together everywhere. We try to calm each other, especially.
Do you have a love song about your love story?
We have a lot of love songs about our love, yes, because we started with that. because after being at the Institute for the Young Blind to raise awareness for people about problems that the disabled were facing, we started singing love songs for ourselves. But then people started knowing them in Europe with Je pense à toi, especially, and other songs also like Chanter, Chanter, like Jainba. There are a lot of love songs we sing.
Have things improved for you since you were younger in Mali in terms of access to technology and education?
It changed a lot, actually. First of all, the attitude toward disabled people by the public and by parents. So now, when the Institute was created, that's what really changed people's general attitude, because they started to see that disabled people could go to school, they could write, could do a lot of things.
What do you like most about performing on stage?
For me, what I love the most about being on stage is hearing people applauding and singing with us. When I hear a lot of noise, that energizes me to sing. I really love that.
Yes, same here. And from a different angle. When we get on stage, we already hear people. But before we start singing, we always ask, how is everybody doing? Either in French or English. And we can tell by the response if the house is full.
How are you?
Amadou et Mariam, thank you so much. Auniche, Auni Barati.
Merci. Merci. See you next time.
Tu n'es jamais venu à ce grand rendez-vous.
Tu n'es jamais venu à ce grand rendez-vous.
Tes copines n'ont rendez-vous.
All right, and that is it for entertainment this week. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Heather. Be sure to watch Africa 54's entertainment report every Friday here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.